Hi, Christy.
Hi, Jeff.
We're recording now.
The many hours of conversation you and I have had,
Yeah.
we've had probably half of them that haven't been recorded.
You know what we should do? We should start a podcast.
You think? Let's call it the why and the buy. How's
All
that?
right.
Welcome, everyone. This is the Why and the Buy podcast. My name is Christy Walters, and I'm joined by Jeff Bajorek. Hi, Jeff. How are you today?
Hey, Christy, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. So I'm excited to have our conversation today. You know, last episode we talked about personal preparation, and we had a lot of really good anecdotes regarding personal preparation, specifically being very consistent in your routine, very focused on your goals, making sure that you establish those both on a long-term and a short-term perspective, and then finding that accountability, whether it's accountability to yourself or accountability to a partner that can help you stay on track with those goals. And so now we're going to take it to the next level. The next step in that conversation is to understand, how do we prep for our sales calls? So you are the expert when it comes to this, and this was your idea. You came up with the initial worksheet on this particular topic. So I'm going to let you kind of take it from here and give us an intro on what we're going to talk about today.
Well, I've been called passionate before, Christy. And the interesting part about this is that we prepared to do this podcast before the last episode. And something came up where you brought up some concepts about personal preparation, and it naturally made its own episode. It naturally just kind of made itself fit. And I think that is fitting, because without laying that groundwork, without laying that foundation, without knowing where you want to go, knowing where you've been and how you're going to get from point A to point B, there's no reason to talk about anything else.
Right.
So, the value in that kind of impromptu episode, so to speak, was that it was a reminder of something perhaps in our own preparation that we missed. Or perhaps it was just that concept itself reminding us not to ignore it. Okay. And
yes. And you're so gracious to not call it my typical tangent. We're going off on a tangent episode. So welcome to that, everyone. That's going to be a regular occurrence.
Well, it wasn't about a tangent. It was one of those, if you want to call it a tangent, it was a beneficial tangent. It was a necessary tangent. And I think that it's something that we all miss.
Right.
I think, one of the things that I like to really focus on when I'm working with someone, or whether I'm just, working with my own business plan, it's what are the fundamentals, and what is that groundwork that needs to be laid, and what is the stuff that we take for granted all the time. And people take that personal preparation for granted, and you really can't. And when things are not going perhaps as smoothly as you'd like, when things are just kind of you're in a rough patch, you just kind of don't know which way to go, a lot of times the thing that you need to do is take a step back, and you need to determine if you're even headed in the right direction and if you're prepared to do anything else. And that word prepared keeps coming up. And so what I do want to focus on with this episode is, what are you doing to prepare yourself for success with your sales calls, with your meetings, with your networking events, or your opportunities? Are you prepared to take advantage of the opportunities that come along? They say that luck is where preparation meets opportunity. The third component to being lucky is being aware of your luck.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's not just, and we're going to talk today a little bit more specifically about the sales meeting. We're going to talk about those times when you have managed to attract the attention of a prospect to the point where they're going to give you some of their time. Okay. That's what we want to focus on today. But being prepared is a state of being. It is not just something that you do. That harkens back a little bit to what we talked about in the last episode. But Christy, when you look at the sales reps that you've managed, when you look at the sales reps that you have worked with and consulted with, maybe you can give it a percentage. Maybe you can go into the broader terms than that. But how well prepared for a sales call is the average sales rep in your experience?
It's hard to lump those together. I think that a lot of people spend time understanding their audience and their objective. Their product and their objective. They spend very little time understanding their audience and their audience's objective. So I would say maybe 50% are truly prepared. It changes significantly depending on the experience level of the rep and the industry that they're in. Oftentimes I find that the more experience you have, the less you prepare because you think you've got this. You talk about your product all the time, so you don't think about spending that same amount of time on your audience and understanding your audience's motivations and what their expectations are. So that's been my experience. What's been yours? You've worked with quite a few people as well.
I think 50% is sky high. I don't know where you worked. I think you've worked with some phenomenal organizations.
I worked with some pretty impressive people, but even then.
I think that it's fair to say that 50% of sales reps have made assumptions about their audience.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think it's fair to say that 50% are actually prepared. I think that you're exactly right. You talk about and you prepare for your product and you prepare for the objectives that you're trying to accomplish, but you don't prepare for your customers, you don't prepare for your prospects, and you don't prepare for how they're looking to utilize your prospect. And I think the biggest flaw in the approach that salespeople have today is they will project their own objectives, their own assumptions, their own values on those of their customer. They'll make assumptions that the prospect wants the same thing out of this interaction that they do. They will call that, oh, I'm thinking about my customer. I'm thinking in terms of them. I'm putting their best interest first. Yeah, you're putting their best interest first as long as they're aligned with your best interest. And that is not the same thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I found a quote. I knew I had it somewhere that I want to go back to, a comment that you made about the difference between luck and work. And it's a quote by Thomas Jefferson. I find that the harder I work, the more luck I seem to have.
Sure.
So, very, very straightforward. I mean, it's absolutely true that we make our own luck. And there's no question that there's timing is a huge portion of it. But I think you're spot on that people we all have a lens that we look through life with, right? And it's all based on our own experiences, our own understandings. And it's important as a salesperson and as an individual just in society as well to step outside of that lens as often as you can and try and gain a new perspective. Oftentimes that comes from having a conversation with someone who has a slightly different view than you do. And this is where I say that the differentiation occurs between those who are fairly new. We're going to take whether or not you're a professional salesperson out of the equation here, but if you're fairly new to an organization, a product, or a service, you tend to spend a lot more time understanding the full 360 view of that product or service, which means what are the motivators for the customer? What are the benefits to that customer so that you can articulate that? Oftentimes, those that are more seasoned in an industry, a product, or a service skip that step because they feel like they know it all. And it's such an important element of continuing to be successful. And I've seen it more times than I care to admit with people who have had successful careers in a particular industry that spans 20, 30, maybe even 40 years. And as they get into that last decade of their career, they get a little tired, right? I mean, it's just hard to, either one, you're always interacting with people who already know you. And by the way, we don't interact with our best friends the same way we interact with someone we've just met at a networking event. The same holds true for a client that you're calling on to sell a service. So you have to spend that time really diving into what the audience needs and what those connections are. And more importantly, you have to build a rapport. If you don't build a rapport, you may actually have the best product for the customer and you may even sell it correctly. But if they don't like you, they're still not going to buy it. Right? That's our famous Jeffrey Gitomer, right? People don't love to be sold, but they love to buy. And if they like you, chances are they'll buy it.
Right. All things being equal, people want to do business with their friends, and all things not being not so equal, they still want to do business with their friends. Right. And
Yes.
Bob Berg gets credited a lot with, was saying that people do business with people they know, like, and trust. And, you've got to be known and liked before you are trusted, at least to some extent. And I think that, let's talk about time. Let's talk about how little of it that anybody seems to have. You need to build that rapport. How are you going to build that rapport? You get 30 seconds, you get 5 minutes, you get a very finite amount of time with somebody. How do you want to use that time? If there's homework that you can do ahead of time, if there's prep work that you can do ahead of time to help it use those 5 minutes in a more advantageous way than having not done that prep work. Right? Don't come in and don't come to a meeting with a prospect and ask about how you can help their business, what their business has been up to, what are their challenges, what are their struggles. Everything your prospects want you to know about them is there for you to find.
Right.
Everything they want you to know about them is there for you to find. Now, you can find more if you ask more questions, if you ask better questions, if you take the information that they give you and you ask them to expand on that. That's what you can use that initial 5-minute meeting for. And that's why those initial meetings are 5 minutes, by the way. They've got 20 for you, but they're going to commit 5. And depending on how you use that 5 is going to determine whether or not they give you more. Christy, I know you've been on meetings before that were supposed to last 5 minutes or 15 minutes, and then at the end of the day, and then 2 hours later, you got to send a text message to your spouse or make a phone call like, hey, we're right in the middle of something. I just noticed what time it was. I'm not going to be home for dinner, right? I'm going to be home late. Or you got to push back your afternoon because this lunch meeting was so engaging, right?
Right.
It doesn't happen because you just stumbled in and asked questions that you should already know the answer to.
Right. Well, I think it's important. I'm sorry, finish that conversation.
Go ahead. No, let's go ahead.
So I think it's important that you bring up the 5, 15, or 20-minute initial call, because there are different objectives for each type of sales call, right? So maybe for a 5 or 15 minutes sales call, your objective isn't to make the sale, because you can't really do that in that time period. Your objective is to get that next meeting and to learn as much as you possibly can in that time period, and to give them just enough information to keep them wanting more. One of the things that I find with salespeople, and even seasoned salespeople, is they never know when to shut up. Just stop talking. And I've had that conversation. I'm like, okay, so give me your pitch, right? So they're struggling a little bit. I'm like, all right, give me your pitch. Let me sell me on this objective. And they get all nervous and they get anxious, and then they just start regurgitating. They throw up all over me with all these feeds and speeds on their product. And I'm like, but none of this is of value to me, right? So tell me why I care. Tell me why I care. And it has nothing to do with your feeds and speeds. By the way, sometimes products and services that are at the highest level on a sales rating have nothing to do with the product or service. It has something to do with all the ancillary pieces that you add, whether it's the individual that's supporting your account, the type of customer service you get, the type of recognition you get from that particular company or that particular organization. The prestige you feel like you get by being on the cutting edge or bleeding edge of technology. I mean, there's just so many factors that come into play. If you don't understand both that company and that individual who will make the buying decision, you will lose out every single time. And you have to figure that out, find 1, 2, or 3 key points, never more than that. Focus in on those, and then shut up. Stop talking.
Well, and you're absolutely right. Just stop it. Right?
Yeah.
The 1, 2, or 3 key points. You've got a shiny piece of paper that your marketing department put together with 10 bullet points on features and expected outcomes and benefits, right?
Right.
You've got to do your homework to understand what those expected outcomes are going to be. Which 3 are going to be the most impactful to the person that you're meeting with? Now, if that is a CEO, he may or she may be interested in overall profitability. If that is a CFO, they may be more interested in bottom line. If that is a chief marketing officer, a CMO, or a chief technology officer, they may be interested in other features and benefits. The beauty of marketing pieces and marketing messages is that they try to apply to a global audience, as global of an audience as possible. The detriment of those same pieces is that they try to appeal to a global audience.
Right.
And what I find is that they're so scrubbed and they're so vanilla is that they're meant to create an awareness. But the actual benefits that each customer is going to take, one, they're going to be different. And two, you can't print those on a piece of paper because you don't actually know what they are. It's the job of the salesperson to take that marketing message and tailor it as specifically as possible. And when I work with people, what I tell them is, okay, what does this benefit mean in terms of me? What does it mean if I'm the customer? What is that going to do for me? Right. And then take it another step, and then take it a step further, even than that. And when you can take it even further than that next step, what you're able to do is take that expected outcome and turn it back into a question.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And when you can ask that question that becomes engaging, it gets them thinking along the lines of what it is that they really could be doing. They view you as someone who has a product or a solution, and that's fine. But can they create in their own minds something that is not possible if it weren't for you?
Right. That's right.
Is what the salesperson's job is.
Right.
That is selling. You want to show up at my front door, knock at the front door of the office. The secretary is going to take your information, schedule an appointment, whatever it is. And then you come in and then you tell me all about your features and benefits. Why do I need that? How many of your prospects, Christy, cannot read?
Oh, or won't. Right.
But what I mean is not that they won't, because most of them won't. But the thing is, if you don't bring any more value to that interview, that sales call, than the piece of paper, I'll tell you what, I can read the brochure in 20 seconds. I don't need to give you even the 5 minutes I promised you. You better come with something more valuable than a marketing message that's really not tailored at all.
Well, and especially in today's age, right? Because all you need to do is just leave a brochure behind, and all of a sudden they're on the internet looking at all of your competitors and deciding that if you don't add any value, they're going to make this decision on their own.
Right.
So that it happens all the time. We see it day in and day out. If you don't have that view, and not every sale is a consultative sale. I do get that. But if you don't have that presence that says, I'm here for your business, I'm here to help you I'm here to either make your day better, make the company more money, whatever that motivating factor is for your client. And there are tons of different ways you can go about finding that out. You really have to be able to articulate that. And so even though they're going to still do the competitive research on you, they're going to remember that you either had like this nugget of information on their particular industry, or this insight that they really enjoyed, and that not going through you as an individual, they're going to lose something. It's going to make a difference if they choose not to go with you.
Absolutely. And I mean, part of that same preparation, have you reviewed your competition? I know you got the brief. Yeah. I know you got the bulletin. I know that the marketing reps or the product managers or whoever it is in your marketing department or even in your sales department has said, hey, so-and-so of our competitors or these competitors have come out with this new product or whatever it is. You're aware of that, but know that your customer is going to do that research. You better do that research before she does, so you can filter the research that she's going to do through the lens that you want her to view it.
That's right. That's exactly right.
There's so much about selling that is out there for you to go and find. And if you want to do a Google search for overcoming objections, then go right ahead. And you're going to come up with hundreds of books and experts and speakers and lectures and YouTube videos and podcasts and everything. It's out there. My question is, my point is, if you let it get to the point where there's an objection, you've failed.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think that objections are opportunities.
Right? They
so
are.
there are great opportunities. If you're not prepared for that objection, you failed.
That's
I think
what I
you're
mean.
right. I think that you're spot on.
But by being prepared for an objection, I mean that you've already addressed that objection before it becomes one.
Right. Well, and I think there's, you have to be prepared for what could go wrong.
Yes.
I'm a big proponent of laying out the worst case scenario. I think that you need to begin with the end in mind, and to quote our buddy Stephen Covey, right? From 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. That was one of the books that I really enjoyed. But you begin with the end in mind. What is your ultimate objective? When everything goes well, what do you think? What can happen? And then go down from there. So what is the next level? So maybe it's not a signed contract, but it's a follow-up meeting. Maybe it's a meeting with other decision makers in the business. Maybe it's a try and buy. Maybe it's a demo that you can do with your customer. Right. There are a lot of different ways that a sales call can go without having it be pass or fail. But the flip side of that coin is that you have to anticipate what happens if either one, you screw up and you say something that's offensive to the customer, or you just get a negative vibe. I've been in those meetings before, and I rarely get negative vibes from people, so they stick out in my mind. Right. And you just get that vibe of, I just want you out of my office. And it may have nothing to do with you. It may be that their mind is in a different place. What is your strategy if things don't go well? Maybe they have your competitor sitting in the lobby with you at the time that you show up. That's happened as well, right? Maybe you're in a situation where you have to do a demo and there's 4 or 5 other competitors that are coming to do the same. So, there's a whole lot of things that can affect the performance of a sales call. You need to anticipate what those could be. It needs to feel as though you had interest and energy around this sales call. And a lot of that is going to come out just in your preparation. So you need to understand what your ideal and maybe your not so ideal outcome will be.
I agree with that. And some of that comes with experience. I think that learning curve is shortened dramatically when you can anticipate those situations. And that's what I mean when it comes to objections. And that's another podcast. I don't want to belabor the overcoming objections point. I just think that when you know that something has a high probability of happening, that you should know how to handle that ahead of time.
Yep.
If that's an objection or just a bad vibe, or when your prospect gets the call from the other office that something has just happened, it's emergent, we've got to reschedule this meeting. There have to be plans in place for how to handle every situation. A natural, what do you do if there's an earthquake during your sales call? All right, well, emergency rules and procedures.
Okay, you might not be able to prepare for every scenario.
And we just figure, so let's not belabor the preparation either. But the fact of the matter is, the hard part of selling comes in the prep work.
Yeah.
They're really hard. It's mundane. It's boring. It requires you to sit still, which is something I'm not very good at doing, but you have to discipline yourself to do. And what you find is that when you can prepare yourself properly, not only does the selling part come much more easily, but it also is a heck of a lot more fun.
Yeah.
When you know that you've got your wits about you, when you know that you own personally your product, your service, you have such an understanding of how it works, and why it works for the people who are also looking at it, and you can weave the experience into your presentation ahead of time. You can put your customer in the place, your prospect in the place where it feels like they're already using it, because you just understand their particular hot buttons, their buying motives, their whatever it is that you want to call them. You have such an understanding not only of your product, but the problem it solves or the goal it helps your prospect attain. You get to tell a great story. You get to build rapport. You get to build that trust in a much more accelerated manner than if, hi, Ms. Walters. Oh wait, I see that your last name's hyphenated. Do I call you the whole thing or just one? Like, you know that. You should know that when you come in.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that's the thing that I think most people miss. And you spend so much time crafting a pitch, perfecting a pitch. What does that pitch mean? And most times those crafted and perfectly perfected, redundantly perfectly perfected pitches, they miss the point. And
you have to be able to be conversational.
You need more than one pitch. You need more than one pitch for the same product, because if I'm pitching something to you versus something, to your, coworker down the hall, if you're the chief technology officer and they're the chief sales officer, that same product may benefit them both, but in different ways.
Yep, absolutely.
So the same pitch will not work.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a great way to kind of get this, to sum this up too. We talked a lot about preparation, and I think, we talked earlier in our production discussion about, do we go deeper into some of these topics? And I think this is one we're going to come back and revisit again. We talked about knowing your audience. We talked about knowing your product, and we talked about knowing your objective for the meeting itself. And I think each one of those we could probably narrow down and talk about specific elements that you can utilize, or tools that you can utilize in each of those. So look for that, I think, going forward in some of our future podcasts. But Jeff, what are we going to talk about next time?
Well, we're going to talk about attitude next time. And I think attitude is one of those underrated subjects. It's something that's taken for granted a lot. And when you think about the discipline that it takes to be prepared, your attitude makes up a tremendous portion of your ability to be disciplined. Your attitude when you get up in the morning is going to be bombarded by negativity and things that aren't going to go your way. And your ability to be resilient through that bombardment is going to have a dramatic effect on your success. And it is not always taken as seriously as it should. You thought I was passionate about preparation. Watch me go next time. We're gonna get ready to rock. I'm a big proponent of attitude, but not only a positive attitude, taking it to the next level is something I call swagger. And we're going to talk about that next time. Christy, why do we do this podcast?
Well, because when you understand your whys, your hows and your whats get much better.
Absolutely, every single time. Thanks for being with us this time, and we'll hope to see you, or hope to have you listen to us the next time.
See ya.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Why and the Buy podcast. If you liked us, subscribe. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, SoundCloud, and really anywhere else you can get a podcast. And if you really liked us, then give us a 5-star review. We like those, and we like you too. Here at the Why and the Buy podcast, we've got our own house band. Christy and I think they're absolutely perfect for what we're trying to do with this podcast, and we hope you think so too. If you like them as much as we do, then you should check them out. They're called Haskins, and they're based in southeastern Michigan. You can find their music and more at haskinsmusic.com. Go check them out.
Well, I knew something was wrong.